Hello everyone, this is the Chubby Funster. Today I'm going to be analyzing Freedom and Adventure for the DarkSun setting, published by TSR in 1991 for 2nd edition D&D. It was published in this cool looking binder-like case with two spiral-bound booklets and gave us this iconic piece of DarkSun artwork from Brom. DarkSun was a very unique setting that was very different from existing RPG content, and Freedom is designed to help a new GM set up their entire campaign by having them fight their way out of a gladiatorial arena and earn their freedom. Now, I'm normally against including a lot of fiction in a role-playing game setting, but considering the radically divergent nature of DarkSun, I think it's a good choice. Having something that explains the world in addition to just rules is a really strong element here. The flipbook design is pretty ingenious, allowing the players to flip to various illustrations in their own player's book whenever they're directed by the GM. So when they meet an NPC, they can flip to the page and see what that NPC looks like. Say what you want about the old second edition stuff. They were innovating on so many levels, settings, physical design, and more. Everything here is so it's easy to visualize and communicate things to the players, which is exactly what you need. My biggest criticism of this module is the built-in railroading, but I think there's a ton to learn about adventure design here. There are 5 possible opening encounters. It admits up front that this is unfair, but it emphasizes that you need to use these moments to reveal setting information to the players, teach them about this strange and unusual world, focus on exposition, not achieving the player's goals, and all PCs need to end up in the same place, enslaved at Kalak's ziggurat. Some of my viewers will recognize this as a cinematic design flow from my Adventure Design 101 video. There are different kinds of these designs, but most of them emerged in the late 80s and early 90s as people struggled to adapt old style D&D to all kinds of new settings. I've even made my own DarkSun adaptation for Shadowdark, but one of the things I did struggle with is that so much of the DarkSun material is in a cinematic format, not the traditional D&D design. So it's difficult to replicate in the style that I prefer, and then I get distracted by new shiny objects. But I still love DarkSun to death. In Elf Brawl, 2 elves are being arrogant dicks. Hard to imagine, I know. A fight ensues and everyone is arrested. In Serious Offense, a noble pushes you into a fruit cart, guards come, bribery happens, everybody gets arrested. In Preservers, a good magic user runs into the inn to hide, Templars come looking for them, nobody squeals, everybody gets arrested. In Press Gang, they just seal off the street and everybody gets arrested. It is the only one with a decent combat option, though. And in Shanghai, you are drugged and taken as slaves once you fall asleep. In all of these, there is a possibility that 1 or 2 PCs will escape the net. In the case of Preservers, you can turn in the Preserver and get paid for it. But the GM is just supposed to spring a different encounter on whoever escapes. All roads lead to the ziggurat. Now, I have no problem with telling players, oh, you wake up in the slave pens, or you're in a wagon on your way into the grand arena. But what really annoys me is putting players in positions where they can make choices, but then none of those choices matter. If you're going to negate choices, just be open about it. Don't manipulate them into thinking that they can do things. In part 2, the GM is given tools to highlight many of the interesting things about DarkSun. There's a good description of daily life in the pens, way more than you would include in a normal module. For example, the GM can use this time to teach players about food and water in a world with very little of either. Contrast that with a normal campaign start where everyone shows up in the tavern and there's plenty of water and plenty of food and we know what's going on. I point this out because if we're going to try to introduce players to a totally new setting, there's a lot to learn from this design style. They also devote a lot of text describing how bribery works, how guard rotations are handled, how crime is taken care of in the pits, and so on. But there's still a lot of railroading. I actually love this sentence. For the purposes of freedom, you do not want the PCs to escape. like, Wow. Unless a specific encounter calls for escape. There's also the following tactics let you program fair failure for the PCs. Yeah, fair. So the real slaver here is the GM. This part of the adventure has both encounters, similar to those in the opening, and scenes where there is no specific outcome you're trying, just to introduce things to the players. These are the scenes for allies. Enemies are next. It says they're supposed to be played out over a period of 1 or more days and interlaced with the other encounters. Each ally comes from a particular opening encounter. For instance, the preserver that was being hunted by the Templars is here as well. They got arrested just like everyone else in the inn, but you can use any of these regardless of how the opening played out, because all these people are just getting arrested anyway. So it's good that they manage time in this way, that there's like multiple days for you to go through normal daily life in the pens, and you meet other people and you learn how the world works. And the enemies are intended to have the opposite effect, reinforcing the deplorable conditions and intensifying PC discomfort in their situation. There's a cruel overseer who takes out his rage on everyone. He's kind of a relentless presence. And then there are other scenes that each introduce a minor NPC. For instance, someone is stealing water from everybody's water. Of course, it's a damn elf. If you confront him about it, 3d6 of his buddies jump into the fight. So you can use these scenes to slowly build up the location, build up NPCs, and the horror that is elves, and also the setting as a whole. And there are again 5 encounters to choose from, and each one presents a moral question. A friend in need is once again elves being terrible people, this time verbally harassing a half giant. The PCs can choose to intervene or not. Girl trouble is a cat fight between 2 gladiators that goes too far. One is going to kill the other unless the PCs intervene, because the guards aren't going to do it. And treachery is an opportunity for one PC to become an informing snitch. And plots is the opposite. They discover a snitch and have to decide what they're going to do about it. And in Kindness of Strangers, a preserver kills some guards, and the PCs can either help them escape, which involves killing another guard, or let them face their fate. In all of these situations, the PCs have to make complex moral decisions while enslaved themselves and subject to punishment at any time, living every day in fear of their lives. I have repeatedly advocated for settings and encounters and dungeons with terrible realities like what is being presented in DarkSun, because without those realities, you can't make moral decisions to oppose them. In places like the Radiant Citadel, you aren't choosing to be good, because all evil has been excised from the setting, except, of course, the evil of a place where all the law enforcement agents have mind reading powers and exile you for wrongthink.
Ironic.
Part 3 is designed to bring synthesis. The players can strengthen their relationships with allies and undermine their enemies. There's guidance for the GM on how to build prior decisions into future realities. For example, the PCs, if they help the half giant versus the elves, then the half giant acts like a bodyguard for them now. If someone becomes an informer, they reap the benefits of that decision, and so on. There's a very interesting section here that describes how to transition from a GM guided tour type experience to a player led experience, and this is basically pure gold. In fact, screen cap this and send it to the people you know that need this advice. Like I said earlier, teaching DarkSun to people must have been very hard. Players were confused by the lack of a dungeon. As I covered in my Dungeon Design 101 video, dungeons are just decision trees where you make decisions from limited choices that you have at any particular moment. It's always important to consider a work in its historical context. DarkSun clearly struggled to explain to people how to play D&D without a dungeon. They even provided messages that you can have delivered to the PCs to spur them into action, such as, "Thank you for saving me, meet by the ziggurat tonight." And once again, there are 5 encounters that you can use to support this phase. Each encounter tackles serious moral questions. In Bodyguard, their new ally takes a moral stand, Will they stand with them even if they might disagree about doing it right this second? And into the arena, a PC can train to become a gladiator, but it's risky and there's a possibility of injury. Are they willing to take that risk? In management potential, the PC is put in charge of other slaves. How will they act as an overseer if things start to go wrong? In Champions of the Cause, a resistance movement begins to come up with a plan for escape. Are the PCs going to get involved in that? And in Dispatches, the preserver they saved asks them to carry secret messages. Are they going to take that risk? Each time, the PCs have to make complex moral decisions that could place them in grave danger. They have to decide how involved they want to be with their allies, with the resistance movement, with the overseers. These are great questions to grapple with. Part 4 is a rising series of narrative events. The ziggurat nears completion. Gladiatorial games are going to be held. The PCs are prepared and placed in the arena, and after a couple of matches, the Sorcerer King is assassinated and all hell breaks loose. And as the riot unfolds in Part 5, the text provides the GM with notes on how each of the groups behaves. Commoners run for the exits, Templars try to restore order, guards fight for a while and then run away. The PCs have a chance to lead the mob, but a lot of that will be based on how they have built alliances with the other slave NPCs. They provide guidance on how to run the combat in a few different ways, and they provide guidance on how to build up the horror, as Kalak's final act is to unleash horrible magic on the populace that begins draining a point from every ability score every turn. Ouch. The GM hits the PCs with an opening encounter, with a chance to act quickly and rapidly gain a bunch of followers, and then they're faced with a choice of 4 possible options: charging out into the mass of people, facing down a Templar who's trying to restore order, climbing over the balcony, or taking a passage where a lot of people have already been cut down and lay bloody on the floor. Each choice then leads to a tailored encounter for that situation. And then part 6 is a mad dash for freedom. First, they have to remove a massive stone block that's closing off their escape. The longer this takes, the more people get killed by Kalak's draining magic. And then the High Templar intervenes and stops the magic and declares himself the new emperor. People begin choosing their loyalties. Now, the PCs can choose that as their path forward, or they can escape into the desert and live as free people, whatever they want to do.
We mortals are but shadows and dust. Shadows and dust, Maximus!
So that's how you're supposed to kick off your DarkSun campaign, in a world without dungeons. It's not a bad solution when you think about it. Even if Freedom is a railroaded cinematic adventure, it can still teach us a lot about how to introduce new players to totally new settings and convey a lot of information in a short period of time. The short, simple pages provide a great way to manage GM bandwidth and make it easier to run. Like many things, a close reading of the text can really teach you a lot about what was going on in the past, how people run things at their tables, and how they treat new settings, new worlds. That's all I got for today. Chubby Funster out.